Paula Whitman lived a life built on endurance. In Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet neighborhood where mornings looked the same from one house to the next, she was known as a dependable woman, a devoted wife, a careful mother, someone who never raised her voice and rarely asked for more than what was already given. From the outside, her marriage to Alex Whitman appeared solid, respectable, even enviable. They had 2 children, steady jobs, a home that was always clean, and a routine that never drew attention. Nothing about their life suggested instability, and that, Paula believed, was proof that she was doing something right. Yet beneath the calm surface, the marriage leaned unevenly. Alex was present but distant. He fulfilled his responsibilities, but his warmth came in fragments, brief moments that felt scheduled rather than natural. Paula learned to measure his moods by the way he set down his keys or answered simple questions. She told herself this was what long marriages looked like: comfort over passion, stability over closeness. She accepted that imbalance quietly, convincing herself that love did not always need to be visible to be real. Her days followed a strict rhythm. Mornings began early, preparing breakfast, packing lunches, making sure the children were dressed and ready before school. She worked during the day, a job that required focus but left little room for emotion. In the evenings, she returned home to cook, clean, help with homework, and prepare the house for another predictable night. The routines were familiar, almost comforting. They gave her something solid to hold onto when her thoughts began to wander. When she lay in bed at night, listening to Alex breathe beside her, she reminded herself that this was what commitment looked like, showing up even when it felt lonely. The quiet tension in her life sharpened whenever Agnes Whitman entered the room. Her mother-in-law never openly insulted Paula, never raised her voice or caused a scene. Instead, her disapproval lived in small gestures and carefully chosen words. A glance that lingered too long, a comment about how things used to be done, a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Paula sensed the judgment constantly, even when nothing was said. She responded the only way she knew how, by trying harder. Cooking meals she hoped would be appreciated, keeping the house immaculate, remaining respectful, patient, and invisible when necessary. Deep down, Paula believed effort could fix anything. If she stayed calm, if she remained kind, if she endured without complaint. She told herself that families did not fall apart when someone was willing to hold them together. And so she carried the weight quietly, with restrained hope and suppressed anxiety, convinced that if she just tried a little harder, the cracks would never widen enough to be seen. The Whitman house was filled with voices that evening, the familiar hum of a family gathering arranged to appear effortless. It was Alex's birthday, and as always, the celebration took place at his parents' home. The dining table was set neatly, candles already lit before dusk, the air carrying the mixed scents of cooked food and polished wood. From the outside, it looked like any other family honoring a milestone with quiet tradition. Paula arrived with the children slightly earlier than planned. She had chosen her clothes carefully, standing in front of the mirror longer than usual, smoothing the fabric, adjusting her hair, making sure nothing looked careless. She smiled when greeting everyone, kissed Alex on the cheek, and accepted polite compliments with practiced grace. To anyone watching, she appeared calm, composed, fully present. She laughed when expected to laugh, helped in the kitchen without being asked, and checked on the children often, making sure they stayed close and behaved well. Agnes Whitman moved through the evening with her usual authority, directing small details with subtle commands disguised as suggestions. She barely acknowledged Paula's efforts, offering brief nods instead of praise. Paula noticed, as she always did, but chose to ignore it. Tonight was not about her. It was Alex's birthday. That alone, she told herself, mattered. At one point, Paula stepped away from the table to check on a dish warming in the kitchen. The hallway was quiet, the voices from the living room muffled by distance. As she reached the corner near Alex's father's study, she slowed. Agnes's voice drifted through the half-open door, low but sharp, carrying easily in the still house. She was speaking to Alex. Agnes did not soften her words. She spoke plainly, without hesitation, criticizing Paula's appearance, her weight, the way she carried herself. She questioned Paula's value as a wife, her ability to keep Alex interested, her worth as a woman. There was no anger in Agnes's tone, only certainty, as if she were stating facts long accepted. Paula stood frozen, her hand still resting against the wall. She waited for Alex to interrupt, to defend her, to shut the conversation down. Instead, his response came slowly, uncertain, wrapped in vague excuses. He did not agree openly, but neither did he object. His voice lacked urgency, lacked loyalty. He let his mother speak without consequence. The moment stretched longer than Paula could bear. She stepped back quietly before either of them noticed her presence. When she returned to the dining room, her face remained unchanged. She took her seat, answered questions when spoken to, and smiled for the sake of the children. Inside, something collapsed. Shock dulled her senses first, followed by disbelief. She replayed Agnes's words in her mind, over and over, each repetition sinking deeper. The humiliation was complete, but it remained unspoken. Paula said nothing. She swallowed the pain, held her posture steady, and carried the weight of the evening in silence. As the celebration continued around her, unaware that everything had already changed, Paula returned to the dining room as if nothing had happened. She took her place at the table, smoothing her napkin across her lap, her movements careful and controlled. Conversation flowed around her, casual remarks about work, the children's school, plans for the weekend, but she felt separated from it, as though a thin sheet of glass now stood between her and everyone else. Agnes Whitman's behavior had changed. The politeness remained, but it was stripped of any pretense of warmth. Her questions to Paula were brief and pointed, her responses clipped. When Paula spoke, Agnes listened with a faint, tight smile that never reached her eyes, as if indulging courtesy she no longer believed necessary. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The judgment that had once lived in quiet glances now surfaced openly, no longer disguised. Paula felt it immediately. The disrespect was no longer hidden behind social manners or indirect comments. It moved freely through the room, carried in Agnes's tone, her posture, the way she addressed everyone else with ease while treating Paula like an afterthought. No one called it out. No one acknowledged the shift. The silence around it made the moment heavier. Alex remained distant. He avoided looking at Paula, focusing instead on his plate or the conversation on the other side of the table. When she spoke, he did not respond directly. When she reached for a shared memory or an easy remark meant to reconnect, he offered only short answers, his attention drifting away almost immediately. The absence of support was louder than any insult. Paula did not need words to understand what it meant. The children, unaware of the tension, laughed and spoke freely. Paula watched them closely, anchoring herself to their presence. She smiled when they smiled, answered their questions gently, and reached out to steady them when their excitement grew too loud. For their sake, she held her composure. She would not let them see the fracture forming beneath the surface. She would not allow the evening to collapse into conflict. Inside, the humiliation pressed in from all sides. It sat heavy in her chest, tightening her breath, but she did not react. She did not defend herself. She did not confront Agnes or demand an explanation from Alex. Instead, she endured. She straightened her shoulders, kept her voice even, and remained seated at the table until the end of the meal. Paula left the gathering with her dignity intact, though it felt fragile in her hands. No scene had been made. No words had been exchanged. Yet the message had been delivered clearly, in full view of everyone. And for the first time, she understood that the silence she had relied on for years was no longer protecting her. It was exposing her. Later that night, the house fell into its usual silence. The children were asleep, the lights dimmed, and the familiar sounds of the neighborhood faded into the background. Paula moved through the bedroom, slowly, changing clothes with deliberate care, aware of Alex beside her. The space between them felt wider than the bed allowed, charged with everything that had gone unspoken during the evening. She lay down and turned toward him, searching for something familiar, something reassuring. Her hand brushed his arm, tentative but hopeful. It was a small gesture, one she had made countless times before, a quiet invitation rather than a demand. For a brief moment, she waited, listening for his response, holding her breath. Alex shifted away almost immediately. He offered an excuse without looking at her, his voice low and detached. He mentioned a scent, something about her perfume being too strong, said he was tired, that it was not the right moment. The words landed heavily, not because of what they were, but because of how easily they came. There was no hesitation, no attempt to soften the rejection, just distance, clean and final. Paula withdrew her hand and lay still, staring at the ceiling. She understood at once that this was not about physical discomfort. It was not about fatigue or fragrance. The rejection carried something deeper, something colder. It felt deliberate, emotional, a withdrawal that had been forming long before this night and had finally made itself undeniable. Sleep did not come easily. Paula remained awake long after Alex's breathing slowed, her thoughts circling back through the evening. Agnes's voice, Alex's silence, the way he had turned away from her without a second glance. Each memory layered itself over another, pressing down until the weight became unbearable. She thought of earlier years when closeness had come naturally, when his touch had felt grounding rather than distant. She remembered moments of laughter, of shared plans, of believing that intimacy was a constant rather than something that could quietly disappear. Somewhere along the way, she realized that certainty had eroded. Not suddenly, but gradually, through small absences she had chosen not to question. Lying there in the dark, Paula felt the loneliness settle in fully. It was no longer a vague sense of imbalance she could explain away. It was a clear, painful truth she could no longer ignore. Whatever held their marriage together had thinned beyond repair, and the space between them was no longer physical. It was emotional, and for the first time, she understood that it might never close again. Alex left 2 mornings later. He said very little as he gathered a few things from the bedroom, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who had already made the decision before speaking it aloud. He told Paula he needed space, that he needed time to think. His tone was measured, almost careful, as if rehearsed. He avoided details and did not explain how long he would be gone. When Paula asked where he was going, he gave a vague answer and turned away. The front door closed softly behind him. There was no argument, no raised voices, no final exchange meant to explain or repair what was breaking apart. Paula stood in the hallway long after his car pulled away, listening to the silence settle into the house. It felt heavier than before, as though the walls themselves had absorbed his absence. The first day passed slowly. Paula checked her phone constantly, expecting a message, a missed call, any sign that Alex would reach out. None came. By the second day, the quiet had become unbearable. She called him in the evenings, then in the mornings, then again at night. Each call went unanswered. She left brief messages at first, asking if he was safe, reminding him of the children. Later, the messages became shorter, more restrained, as if she were afraid of saying the wrong thing. The days blurred together. Paula went to work, completed her tasks, and returned home on time. She cooked dinner, helped with homework, and kept the routines intact. For the children, nothing was allowed to change. When they asked where their father was, she told them he was busy, that he needed to rest, that he would call soon. She smiled when she said it, forcing reassurance into her voice. She refused to let them see the worry tightening her chest. At night, exhaustion crept in. Paula lay awake, staring at the darkened room, her phone resting beside her. Each passing hour without contact chipped away at her sense of stability. Fear grew quietly, feeding on unanswered questions. Was he safe? Was he coming back? Or had he already chosen not to? Her body responded before her mind fully caught up. She moved through her days with growing fatigue, her concentration slipping, her patience thinning. The effort of holding everything together drained her. Every sound startled her. Every vibration of her phone sent a rush of hope that quickly dissolved into disappointment. By the end of the week, Paula felt herself slipping into an emotional freefall. The absence was no longer temporary. It had become a presence of its own, filling the space Alex left behind. And with each unanswered call, the reality pressed closer. She had been left alone to carry the weight of a family that might no longer exist. Paula went to Agnes Whitman's house on the 7th day after Alex left. She did not announce the visit in advance. By then, exhaustion had stripped her of hesitation, leaving only the need for clarity. She could no longer endure the silence, the uncertainty, the endless speculation that filled her nights. Whatever the truth was, she needed to hear it spoken aloud. Agnes opened the door with a look of mild irritation, as though Paula's presence were an inconvenience rather than a concern. She did not invite her in right away. The brief pause, the assessing glance, made it clear that this visit was neither unexpected nor welcome. When Paula finally stepped inside, the house felt unchanged, orderly, controlled, untouched by the chaos unfolding elsewhere. Paula did not waste time. She asked where Alex was. She asked why he had disappeared without explanation. Her voice remained steady, but the effort it took was visible in the tension of her posture, the way her hands clenched together as she spoke. Agnes responded without hesitation. She said Alex was involved with another woman. Her name was Karina Blake. She said it plainly, without lowering her voice, without a trace of discomfort. There was no pause meant to soften the blow, no concern for how the words might land. Agnes spoke as though she were stating a practical fact, something long overdue to be addressed. Paula felt the room tilt slightly. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, her breath catching in her throat. She asked how long it had been happening. Agnes dismissed the question with a shrug. The length of the affair, she implied, mattered far less than the reason behind it. That reason, Agnes insisted, was Paula herself. She blamed Paula for letting herself go, for becoming uninteresting, for focusing too much on the children and not enough on her husband. She said Alex's choices were understandable, even inevitable, given the circumstances. In Agnes's eyes, the affair was not a betrayal, it was a consequence. There was no sympathy offered. Not for Paula, not for the children. Agnes spoke of them only in passing, as if their presence in the situation were irrelevant. She made it clear that she would not intervene, would not encourage Alex to return, would not acknowledge any responsibility toward Paula's family. Paula listened in silence as the final pieces fell into place. The betrayal was complete. Not only from her husband, but from the family she had tried so hard to serve. The cruelty of Agnes's words settled deep, crushing whatever fragile hope remained. When Paula finally stood to leave, her legs felt unsteady. Agnes did not follow her to the door. There was no goodbye, no acknowledgement of the devastation left behind. Outside, Paula paused only long enough to breathe. Then she walked away, her composure dissolving with each step. By the time she reached her car, the weight of the truth pressed down fully. The marriage was over. The protection she believed family provided had never existed, and in that moment, she felt herself break completely, overwhelmed by betrayal, cruelty, and a loss that left nothing untouched. Paula did not remember when she first sat down beside Ethan that evening. She only remembered the quiet that filled the room once the younger child had gone to bed. The house felt too still, every sound amplified by the weight of what she carried. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his shoulders slightly hunched, his attention fixed on nothing in particular. He had been watching her all week, noticing more than she wanted him to see. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with the same caution she used when handling something fragile. She told him that his father would not be coming home for a while. She did not explain everything. She did not need to. Ethan did not ask where Alex was or when he would return. Instead, he looked up at her with a seriousness that caught her off guard. He said he already knew something was wrong. Ethan spoke quietly, but his words carried weight. He mentioned the unanswered phone calls, the way Paula checked her messages constantly, the tension that never left her face. He said he had overheard parts of conversations, had felt the shift even before Alex left. There was no accusation in his voice, only understanding, mixed with confusion and hurt. Paula felt her composure falter. She had tried so hard to shield him, to preserve his sense of safety, but he had seen through it. Children, she realized, noticed more than adults wanted to admit. Ethan did not speak like a child in that moment. He spoke like someone forced to grow up too quickly. She apologized without fully knowing what she was apologizing for the uncertainty, for the pain, for the life that no longer looked the way it was supposed to. Ethan listened, then reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was simple, instinctive, and grounding. He told her they would be okay, that she was doing everything she could, that she should not blame herself for what had happened. His voice wavered slightly, but he did not pull away. He held her gaze, offering reassurance when she had nothing left to give herself. In that moment, something shifted inside Paula. The grief was still there, heavy and raw, but it no longer stood alone. It was joined by clarity. She understood that surrender was not an option. Whatever despair waited for her, she could not allow it to take control, not when her children depended on her to stand. Paula squeezed Ethan's hand and straightened her posture. The pain did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became something she could carry. Survival was no longer about enduring for her own sake. It was about protecting the lives that still needed her, anchoring herself to them, and finding the strength to move forward one step at a time. Margaret Lewis noticed the change before Paula said a word. It showed in the way Paula moved through the office, quieter than usual, her focus slipping in small but telling ways. She arrived on time, completed her work, and spoke when necessary, but the steadiness that once defined her was gone. The fatigue sat visibly on her shoulders, and the careful composure she maintained began to crack at the edges. One afternoon, Margaret asked if Paula wanted to take a short walk during their break. The question was gentle but deliberate. Paula hesitated, then agreed. They stepped outside, the late afternoon air cool and steady, offering a brief sense of distance from everything pressing in on her. Paula did not plan to tell the whole story, but once she began, the words came without restraint. She spoke about Alex leaving, about the silence that followed, about Agnes's cruelty and the affair with Karina Blake. She did not dramatize it. She spoke plainly, as though laying facts on the table was the only way to keep herself upright. By the time she finished, her voice had grown quiet, stripped of emotion, as if she had already exhausted herself reliving it. Margaret listened without interrupting. She did not rush to comfort or soften the truth. When Paula finally fell silent, Margaret spoke with calm certainty. She told Paula that pleading would not bring dignity back, that begging someone to stay only deepened the wound. She said that what had been done could not be undone by endurance alone, and that Paula did not owe her silence to anyone who had chosen to abandon her. Her words were firm, but not harsh. Margaret spoke about boundaries, about protecting self-respect, about choosing strength even when it felt unnatural. She reminded Paula that family was not defined by who walked away, but by who remained present and accountable. Paula absorbed the words slowly. She did not argue or defend her past choices. Instead, she listened, letting the ideas settle in her mind. The definition of family she had carried for years began to shift. It no longer centered on holding something broken together at all costs. It began to include safety, stability, and respect. By the time they returned to the building, Paula felt steadier. The pain had not disappeared, but it had stopped spinning out of control. For the first time since Alex left, her thoughts felt organized. The chaos had given way to clarity. She straightened her posture, thanked Margaret quietly, and returned to her desk with a sense of calm resolve, aware that strength did not need to announce itself to be real. Alex contacted Paula late one evening, nearly 2 weeks after he had left. His name appeared on her phone without warning, and for a brief moment, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Then it passed. She answered calmly, her voice steady, as if she had been expecting the call all along. He did not begin with an apology. He spoke cautiously, explaining that his mother had insisted he call, that things had become complicated, that they needed to talk. Paula listened without interrupting. She did not ask where he had been or who he was with. She allowed the silence to stretch between his words, letting him feel it. When she finally spoke, her tone was composed, almost formal. She told him they would need to discuss divorce. She spoke about the children first, school schedules, stability, consistency. She made it clear that whatever choices he had made, his responsibilities as a father remained. She mentioned legal matters without emotion, custody arrangements, child support, the need to proceed properly and transparently. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, only clarity. Alex sounded unsettled. He had expected tears, questions, maybe pleading. Instead, he was met with resolve. Paula did not ask him to come home. She did not negotiate affection. She spoke as someone who had already accepted the reality of the situation and was moving forward accordingly. That shift unsettled Agnes more than anything else. Accustomed to control, she found herself losing influence as Paula refused to engage in conflict. Decisions were no longer filtered through her approval. Conversations took place without her. The family structure she had managed for years began to loosen, slipping from her grasp. Her authority, once unquestioned, diminished as the situation moved beyond her reach. Meanwhile, Alex's relationship with Karina Blake began to strain under pressure. The excitement that had once fueled it gave way to discomfort. Karina grew impatient with uncertainty, irritated by Alex's emotional distance and the complications that followed him. She had not expected consequences. She had not expected responsibility. As legal realities approached and expectations surfaced, Karina's interest faded. She became distant, critical, increasingly disengaged. Eventually, she left him, quietly, decisively for someone wealthier, someone without obligations or complications. There was no confrontation, no explanation owed. She simply moved on. Alex was left facing the aftermath alone. The illusion of escape collapsed quickly. The family he had abandoned no longer waited for him, and the life he had pursued offered no permanence. When he reached out again, Paula remained consistent. She did not gloat or retaliate. She continued the conversation on her terms, focused on logistics, boundaries, and the well-being of the children. Justice did not arrive loudly. It unfolded gradually, through consequences rather than confrontation. Power shifted not through argument, but through composure. Paula's calm presence reshaped the dynamic completely. Without raising her voice or demanding acknowledgement, she reclaimed control over her life, allowing the weight of Alex's choices to settle where it belonged. Time passed quietly without ceremony. The seasons changed, and with them, the shape of Paula Whitman's life began to settle into something new. The chaos that once dominated her days gave way to routine again. But this time it was a routine she built deliberately. She focused on work, on her children, on restoring a sense of safety within the walls of her home. The exhaustion remained for a while, but it no longer defined her. Slowly, stability replaced survival. Paula became more present with her children, not out of obligation, but out of renewed connection. Their laughter returned naturally, unforced. The house no longer felt like a place waiting for someone who might never come back. It felt complete on its own terms. She learned how to move forward without carrying constant fear, how to trust herself again after so much doubt. It was during this period that Stephen Lewis became part of her life. He entered quietly, without pressure or expectation. There were no dramatic gestures, no promises made too early. What connected them was steadiness. Conversations built on listening, respect, and patience. Stephen did not ask Paula to explain her past in detail. He accepted what she chose to share and never demanded more. With him, she felt seen without being judged, supported without being controlled. Over time, that sense of security deepened. When Paula discovered she was pregnant, the news did not arrive with fear or uncertainty. It arrived with calm acceptance. She felt grounded, emotionally present, and supported. This chapter of her life did not require endurance. It offered peace. Alex reached out months later. His voice carried a familiarity that no longer stirred anything in her. He spoke of regret, of mistakes, of realizing too late what he had lost. He asked for another chance, framing it as reconciliation rather than intrusion. Paula listened without interrupting, just as she had learned to do. When she responded, there was no anger in her words, no bitterness. She thanked him for speaking honestly, then told him she had moved on. She explained that her life was full, that her children were stable, and that reopening the past would only undo what had been carefully rebuilt. She did not argue or justify her decision. She simply stated it. The conversation ended calmly. Paula set down the phone and felt no urge to revisit it. The door she closed did not slam. It shut quietly, firmly, without regret. In that stillness, Paula understood the nature of her triumph. It was not loud. It was not visible to those who had once doubted her. It lived in her peace, her boundaries, and her ability to walk forward without looking back. Healing did not require revenge. It required letting go, and she had finally done exactly that.